the Kiwanis Club of Indianapolis. As we get started, I hope you guys have all stood in line for 3 hours, gotten your strawberries. If not, plan on the way out. It looks amazing out there. So many people. Let's kick things off. I'd like to invite Greg Silver up to do today's pledge and invocation. You got smart. You didn't approach from the side with all the tripping hazards.
You don't have to stand, but I'll throw that. I want to give a little background for 1 moment. Kelly gave me the opportunity to read something about the Statue of Liberty. I'm going to read the New Colossus. It's a sonnet written by American poet Emma Lazarus in 1883 to raise money for the construction of the Statue of Liberty, the pedestal. In 1903, the poem was cast into bronze below the statue. Lazarus was involved in aiding refugees, among them Jewish in New York, who had fled anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe. The sea-washed sunset gates are the mouths of the Hudson and East Rivers. The imprisoned lighting refers to the electric light and the torch, and a novelty. The air bridge harbor that she refers to the New York Harbor and the harbor in Brooklyn, which were two separate cities at the time. And of course, the huddled masses refers to the large numbers of immigrants arriving in the United States in the 1880s, particularly through New York. Lazarus herself had fled from Russia. Here we go. This is the sonnet below the Statue of Liberty. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gate shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lighting and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air bridge harbor, the twin cities frame. Quote, keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she, end of quote, with silent lips. Quote, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuge of your teeming shore. Said these, the homeless tempest lost to me. I'll lift my lamp beside the golden door. To the pledge now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Greg. We've got a couple of guests today that I'd like to introduce. Yosan Tekle is the Lieutenant Governor of the Indy Metro Division for Key Club. Is that correct? Okay.
That was excellent time.
I'm practicing my waitress skills. Thank you for being here with us. Is there anything you'd like to share about Key Club and the district? And you're welcome to come up.
Sorry to catch you with a mouthful. We do this to everyone that we like.
Good afternoon. My name is Yosan Tekle. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for inviting me here. And I'm an upcoming senior at Speedway High School, and I'm the LTG for Indy Metro Division. My responsible as an LTG for all the key clubs located in the Indy Metro Division of the district is to report back to the rest of the district board about all the issues and projects that occur in my division. This year I have 3 big goals. They are visiting other schools, which I'm currently working on, get in contact with more Kiwanis, which I'm already doing right now, and getting in contact with Builders Club in my division. With these 3 goals, I would like to continue them. I would like to continue them throughout my quarter-2 term as an LT. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Thank you so much. We're also joined today Maria Manalang. Did I get close? I'm sorry. She is a charter member of the Kiwanis Indy Global Club. Maria, would you like to share a couple words with us? Please come on out.
And Maria is helping us grow our Kiwanis family, so very much appreciate that.
Good afternoon. My name is Mariel Manalang, and I am one of the members of the Kiwanis Indy Global Group. I had to find out the name correctly because it was a long one. How the Kiwanis group in the Global Village, if you are not familiar with the Global Village, it's located on the west side of town. If you're familiar with the Lafayette Square Mall, we're right across the street. The Global Village is becoming to be a cultural museum. So we are hoping that anything cultural is happening inside that building. I actually just recently resigned from the Global Village because my life had taken a different direction. So we had our installation just early this year, February or March of this year. How the Global Village came about, as far as the Kiwanis group, is that I was supposed to be introduced to Taka, except that I did the opposite. I introduced myself to Taka, so I didn't wait. And from there, the club basically was formulated. We have 19 members at the moment, from 9 different countries. And so we want the club to be very diverse as far as the involvement, because that's what the Global Village is about. So at this point, the club decided to support what Taka is doing with the Riley Hospital Group. And so when we meet, we bring something with items that we can give to the children at Riley's Hospital. So that's what we have, okay? Thank you, Global Group. Thank you.
If any of you came to the district event, was it last fall, last summer? We brought toiletries and things for Riley. We did some packing of craft items for the children at Riley. That was held at Global Village. So we very much appreciate them opening their home to us for that. So our friends at Perry Township Club have invited us to participate in their golf outing that's coming up on the 22nd of June at Smock Golf Course. Find flyers on the table in the back. If you're able to golf, you want to go out and enjoy some sunshine, some good fellowship, please sign up for that. So I'm excited to announce that it's official. Our slate of officers, our officer elections have closed. I'd like to invite Mary Bullock to say a few words if she would like to. She will be our incoming president this fall. And I will happily pass the gavel to her come October.
What were you thinking? Thank you. I can't remember how long I've been a member, but it's been a long, long time. John Price and Alan Hicks sponsored me to come in, so that was decades ago. And been a member ever since, so thank you very much. I look forward to it. I also look forward to working with everyone who's on the board, the current members as well as those who are coming on board, and working on the strategic plan that we've already started on a little bit, some SWOT research. So looking forward to that and continuing this club and hopefully making it grow. And having exciting speakers. So I look forward to the next year. Thank you so much.
She asked what we were thinking. I wonder what took us so long. I'm very excited for the year to come. In addition to Mary taking the gavel, Eric Rowland has been elected president-elect, so he will follow in her footsteps. And then also thank you to Art Kudroff and Steve Farrow, who will begin their 3-year terms on the board, bringing some very valuable voices and perspectives. Roger will continue as treasurer, And our directors continuing on, Jackie Clancy, Laurel Holloway, Chuck Cotterman, and Wendy Paddock, thank you very much for your continued service. And then again, much appreciation to Nancy Ulrichs, Bill Du Bois, and Duke Haddon, whose terms will round out at the end of October, or the end of September. Although I'm willing to keep them on for a bit. We'll just go with that. Let's see, next week, Anna Wilchel from the Indiana State Fair will join us via Zoom. She's going to talk about some exciting new additions to the fairgrounds. And as you've likely seen in the news this week, they've announced their free concert lineup, some very exciting acts coming to the State Fair this year. She can round out some of the festivities that are going on. And then as we wrap up the month, we'll be back here on the 29th with Stephanie Wells from the Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute. If there are topics that you'd like her to make sure she touches on, please let me know. And more speakers will be announced for the summer and into the fall. Certainly if you have suggestions of folks or topics that you want to hear about, let me know, we'll get those scheduled. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's featured speaker. Exodus Refugee has a long history of welcoming refugees and asylees from many countries, cultures, languages, faiths, and political opinions. They began their work in 1981 with the mission to serve the legal needs of immigrants and Cuban refugees who had arrived as part of the Mariel boatlift in 1980. Since that time, Exodus has helped thousands of refugees establish their lives in Indiana. We are so happy to invite back Director of Development Cassandra Sanborn to share about the $11,000 community impact grant that was provided by the Kiwanis Foundation of Indianapolis for their youth programming last July. Before joining Exodus in January of 2021, she was the Membership and Donor Engagement Manager at the Idle George Museum and the Director of Engagement with Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic. She's a graduate of Purdue University and earned a certificate in nonprofit management from IUPUI. Without further ado, welcome Cassandra.
Okay, let's start off with a sound check. Can everybody hear me okay? Microphone's good? All right, well, thank you so much for inviting me here to join you today. We were here last year, and we're so grateful to receive a really impactful grant from all of you. And I'm just delighted to be back with you here today to give you a little bit of an update of what that grant did. Before I get into that though, I'd always like to give people a little bit of a background about Exodus's services in general. So I'm going to start off with some slides that are just telling you a little bit about who we are and what you do to give you a full picture of what we do. And then we'll talk a little bit about our youth program, and then we will wrap up by talking about World Refugee Day, which is this month on June 20th. So some of these slides we'll go through a little bit quickly at the beginning. So like you just heard, Exodus was founded in 1981 to respond to the Mariel boatlift out of Cuba. We're in a really interesting place in history right now because just a few years ago in 2021, we saw the mass evacuation out of Afghanistan, which is probably the most historically similar event to the Mariel boatlift happening 40 years later. So refugee resettlement's in a really interesting spot nowadays. Currently, our mission is that we are dedicated to the protection of human rights by serving the resettlement needs of refugees and other displaced people who are fleeing persecution, injustice, and war by welcoming them here to Indiana. I like to start off with this part that I call Refugee 101 because this is what is a refugee. There's kind of two ways we think about the word refugee. There's the colloquial definition that we would use in everyday conversation, which is anyone who is fleeing conflict, or what we at Exodus would call humanitarian immigrant. So someone who's leaving their home not because they're looking for economic opportunity, but because they were driven away by war or violence or natural disaster. There's also a legal definition of a refugee. And so when we at Exodus say refugee, we're typically talking about this legal definition that was established by the United Nations. It's up on screen here. So refugees are those who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion, are outside the country of their nationality and are unable to, or owing to such a fear, unwilling to return to their country of origin. So essentially the things to take away from this, because this is a pretty legal definition, are these 5 categories. So race, religion, membership in a social group, political opinion, or nationality are the kinds of things that are driving you away from your home. Refugees would have, in so many cases, rather stayed in their home countries, which I think makes them a really interesting and different type of immigrant to our communities. But they are also people who, once they're here, so embrace our community and getting to be a part of it. And community members like you are so key to welcoming refugees. Just a little bit of global perspective. There are more than 89 million people displaced in the world right now. After the evacuation of Ukraine, the UN has estimates that this number is probably actually over 100 million people. But this is our last official count from the United Nations, is at 89.3 million. Many of those people are still in their home countries, so over 53.2 million have not made it out of their home country, but maybe they're out of their home region or their hometown. This is certainly a number that we saw rise with the evacuation of Ukraine. And about 27.1 million of them are refugees, so they meet that legal definition according to the UN. Basically, if you're still in your home country, you don't qualify as a refugee because you haven't crossed that international border yet. So I also want to show you all a few maps, because I think this is a really interesting thing as we're thinking about where refugees in Indiana come from. So the easy answer to this question of where do refugees come from is all over the world. Anyone can become a refugee. We never know when conflict is going to change what could have been a very stable country and force someone to flee their home and seek safety somewhere else. But in Indiana, we do have a few populations that we're primarily working with. So I have a couple of maps that I'm going to show you. I went all the way back to 2015 to 2016 because this is a year when Exodus resettled over 900 people from all over the world. This was, of course, before the pandemic, and also with a previous political administration when numbers were high in terms of resettlement. But you'll see that the countries where we have the most refugees are Burma, or you might have also heard this country called Myanmar. At Exodus, we still refer to it as Burma because that's the name that our clients tell us they prefer for it to be known as, so we still call it Burma out of respect for their wishes. You'll also see the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We had 146 people from the Congo at that time. This is probably the largest growing population of refugees in Indiana right now, is people who are coming from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The conflict there is driven by technology. There are minerals in the Democratic Republic of Congo that keep all of our cell phones and computers and smartwatches and other devices functioning, coltan and cobalt. And so there are mineral conflicts there that we anticipate will continue for a significant amount of time as mineral rights continue to be a conflict. You'll also see, even all the way back in 2016, we had someone who was fleeing from Ukraine, one individual from Honduras, and several people from the Middle East. Jumping ahead a few years, 2021, our 2021 fiscal year, we only welcomed 131 people to Indiana. COVID-19 made refugee processing overseas really difficult. Refugees go through a long process before they come to the US. And a lot of that couldn't happen overseas during the pandemic. Also, some previous political decisions had reduced the number of refugees who were allowed to come into the country. So the refugee resettlement system is rebuilding right now. But even then, you can see we saw some people from the Congo and from Burma still arriving despite the pandemic. And now I get to share the fun news, which is that we're in a much better place than we were just a few years ago. We're very excited to see numbers picking back up again. And the reason I'm doing all of this is because this all affects the youth program that you all helped support. So I like to give you some of the wider context of what it means when refugees are coming into our community. Globally, a statistic I think you all might find interesting is that at any given point, between 40 to 50% of refugees are children. And so it's a lot to come to a completely new country, be learning completely new languages, cultures, customs, being expected to go to school. And so the funding that you gave us for the youth program helps support these families. And we're seeing more of them, which is the fun part about these slides. From October of 2021 to September of 2022, we welcomed over 398 individuals from Afghanistan. So this was as a part of that mass evacuation. We welcomed many families. The largest family, I think, out of that evacuation was a family of 11, mom, dad, and 9 children, all under the ages of 12, as well as many other families, all seeking safety here in our community. We've seen a really fun community of Afghans starting to form in our community. We're seeing so many Afghan kids join our schools. And it's just been really exciting to see all of the really beautiful diversity and culture that they're bringing to our community, even after just a short period of time here. And of course, we continue to see people from Congo and from Burma. Burma is interesting because the conflict there, just for some context, Indiana has the largest population of people outside of Southeast Asia from Burma in the entire world. So this is a population that is really embedded in our community. We were starting to see arrivals from Burma decrease in the last few years as resettlement was starting to wrap up from the conflict there. But in 2021, the military in Burma overthrew the democratically elected government, and so arrivals have picked back up again now as that country is going through a coup. So we're gonna have to wait and see, which is something we do a lot in refugee resettlement, wait and see how that affects people coming to our community, but we do think those numbers will continue to pick back up as well. This year, we're expecting to see about 715 people arrive before the end of this current fiscal year, which will wrap up this September. We're well on track there. We had 128 people arrive in April, and we're scheduled for 96 this month, and we had 90 last month, so it is picking up and arrivals are high, which is really exciting for all of us. Something else I want to mention here is you're going to see a country not present on this map, and that country is Ukraine. The reason for that is Ukrainians who are coming to the United States right now don't have the legal status of a refugee, and that's because the UN hasn't gone through the process of classifying them all as such. It's a really long process, and typically when we see a refugee come to the United States, it's been at the very least a year since the conflict erupted in their country. So the US government decided they wanted to make a pathway for Ukrainians to come to the United States that was faster. So Ukrainians are arriving through something called humanitarian parole, which is a temporary legal status that gets them some of the benefits of refugees, but not all. We are serving that population here in Indiana, but they're not going to be on my maps because they're coming through a slightly different process. Basically, they're finding their own way here to join friends or family members who are then calling us to say, hey, I have a Ukrainian family member who's staying with me. So it's a slightly different process than what you'll see on these maps. It's also going to seem like I'm talking about Ukraine quite a bit, but we get a lot of questions about it, so that's why I'm addressing that, and also the absence of that on these maps. Very, very briefly, because I know we're trying to stick to a time limit here, and I don't want to go over for all of you. Perfect. Another question we get a lot is, how does resettlement of refugees even work? So, in the United States, we focus on the most vulnerable refugees. So survivors of violence, women and girls who are at risk, refugees with serious medical conditions, and those with other serious protection needs. Each country that does resettlement gets to choose its own qualifications for who we want to resettle. And so the United States looks at those that we believe are the most vulnerable, who are most in need of protection. And the other thing we look at is people who have connections in the United States. So in resettlement, we would call this having a US tie or a connection. So if you have a friend or a family member who's here in Indiana, you are likely going to come to Indiana. And that's part of what you see certain population groups expanding. So that's why we see a lot of Burmese refugees, because then they have a friend or a family member here, or why we might see a lot of Congolese refugees because there's a community already starting to build here in Indiana. Refugees are the most thoroughly vetted group of people to come to the United States. No one in the world gets more security screenings or medical screenings before they come to the United States. And this includes children. So children have to go through, just like their parents, extensive interviews before they come to the United States to make sure they're not a security threat. They have to go through really extensive medical screenings before they come here. And it's a really long and involved process. So by the time kids are here and they're engaging with our youth program, they're really used to like going through these complicated bureaucratic processes, which is kind of a lot to think about if you're thinking about like a little kid who's coming here, and we're thinking like, we want to get you in school, and they have all this experience of like paperwork and interviews and medical screenings. It's just a really different experience than a lot of our kids may have had. I will not go through this entire slide, but I will make sure you guys get a copy because I think it's really interesting to take a look at. This is the process for how someone arrives in the United States and gets their refugee status. So it's kind of hard to see, so like I said, we'll set it out. But the first line on here is a typical refugee. They're going to be fleeing their home country, so fleeing persecution. And then they're going to be connecting with the UN, usually in a third country, and then spending time in a refugee camp. Refugee camps are meant to be temporary, so often you're going to be living in like a temporary structure, maybe a tent or some kind of hut or something that was built out of local materials. You may also be close to a city in a country, so there may be slightly different resources available to you depending on where you're from. And then when you connect with the UN, you're waiting for a long time. You're applying to become a refugee, you're deciding you really want to come to the United States and you're excited and you want to rebuild your life there. But you also might be sad because you know that means leaving your home country behind and the hope of going back behind. Those are all things that people are experiencing regardless of what age they're resettled at. We have adults who come in who are in their 80s who are being resettled and thinking about restarting their lives. We have little kids who can't even talk yet, infants, and everyone in between ages. You're getting connected to the UN, and then if you're gonna come to the United States, you're getting screened by the Department of Homeland Security and the US Department of State. And then they are working with 9 national resettlement agencies and deciding where people are gonna go in the United States. So they're saying like, these people will go to Indiana because they have connections there. These people are going to go to Wisconsin because they have a large population of this group there, so we're going to send them there. So there's these 9 agencies splitting everybody up and making those decisions. And then they work with local nonprofits like Exodus to actually place those families in our communities. So we work with one called Church World Service, or CWS. That's our national partner that we communicate with to get the placements of refugees here in Indiana. Then you show up at the airport. Exodus gets a notice emailed to us that says this family is coming in 2 weeks, usually. Sometimes during the Afghan evacuation, they were saying they're showing up at the airport tomorrow. Be there to get them, which we don't love that as much, but we can make it work when we have to. So typically they give us about 2 weeks of notice before someone is arriving, maybe a month if we're lucky. And then Exodus springs into gear. This is also a slide that I won't go through everything on, just because we could be here all day talking about all of the things on this slide. But when somebody first arrives, we show up at the airport to pick them up on their flight. They're usually put on a flight overseas and then have to make a domestic connection on their own here in the US because Indiana doesn't get too many of those direct flights from overseas. So usually people are making a connection at O'Hare or JFK on their own before they're getting here to Indiana and being picked up by Exodus. And then we take them to a house or an apartment that we have ideally already set up for them. With larger families, I will tell you this is difficult. We had a family of 15 that was supposed to arrive this week. Grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and kids. We do not have a house for them yet because finding enough bedrooms for 15 people is a little bit difficult because we do have to abide by all of the legal standards about how many people can legally be in a house with a certain number of bedrooms. So they would have gone into a hotel temporarily while we continue to look for housing. But the vast majority of the time, we've already set up a house or an apartment with donated supplies from community members so that when you show up and you're tired because your flight probably got in at like 1 a.m. because they tend to put refugees on the cheapest flights. The beds are made so the kids can go right to bed in a nice made bed, and there's dishes in the cabinets and food in the cabinets so you can have breakfast and have food the next day as you're adjusting to life in the US. Exodus is then teaching you all about the US. So we have financial literacy classes, cultural orientation classes, employment readiness classes to teach you how to be an employee in the US, because culture might be different here. And then we're also doing things like providing seasonally appropriate clothing, cell phones for adults, teaching you how to ride the bus, and also we're getting kids enrolled in school. So this is when the youth program first comes in, because we are sitting down with kids in their first 30 days of being here and helping them get connected to a school, taking them to the school often so they have a chance to look at it, making sure they know where their bus is gonna come pick them up. Because that's something that a lot of these kids haven't experienced. I've talked to families that have been in refugee camps for 3 years, but I've also talked to refugees who've been in camps for 8 years or 13 years. I spoke to a young couple from the Sudan recently who were in their early 20s, and they have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they had both been in the camp since they were 11 and 12 years old themselves. So getting on a school bus, if you're a little kid, can be intimidating for the first time, especially if your parents didn't do that either, because they themselves were raised as refugees in a refugee camp. So they don't have that experience to talk to you about. So that's where our youth program comes in, to be that support for families, give them information and teach them, like, what is it gonna be like when your kid goes to school? What will their experiences be? What should they expect? What should you expect for communicating with teachers, getting support? So we just try to come alongside families as they're newly arrived and give them some of that right off the bat.
You have interpreters obviously available, interpreters
We do, yeah.
and legal help for any of them. Obviously, many of them need legal help.
Yeah, we do. So Exodus does have a privately funded legal program as well. We are required by our national partner to connect people to legal services. We're also required to provide all of our services in our clients' languages. So we have several of our own contracted interpreters, and then we also work with Luna Language Services and LTC Language Solutions to make sure someone's always having interpretation. Great question. Like I said, I won't go through all of this because I do want to talk more about the youth program, but let's jump into that. So, our youth program is really working to help children and teenagers adjust to life in the United States. Like I said, we're helping kids enroll in school, but we're also helping kids make a plan for the future. So we have a form that we sit down with kids and do, and it's called a service plan, which is not a very exciting name. But we talk to kids about what are your goals, right? And sometimes the kids have goals like, I want to become a professional soccer player, or I want to be an astronaut, right? Like very similar goals to what other kids may have. So then our youth program is saying like, okay, great, well, if you want to be a professional soccer player, maybe you could get onto a team at your school. And to do that, we'll have to keep your grades up. So like, let's talk about what that could look like. Or if you want to be an astronaut, like maybe we should really think about science for you. So sometimes kids have goals like that. But there's also a young woman who has served through our youth program who now has a full ride to the University of Indianapolis. And her goal was to go into nursing, because when she was living in her village in her home country, there was a single doctor there providing care for the entire village, and she was so motivated by seeing like what a healthcare provider could do that she decided like nursing is something I want to go into. So you also see kids coming in with goals like, how can I do this very practical thing? And a youth program staff member can say, great, let's talk about how we can achieve those goals. Sometimes the realistic nature of goals depends on the kid's age. We see a lot more like, I want to be an astronaut from the little kids. And we tend to get more like, I want to be a nurse from older kids who've had a little more time. Our youth program also connects kids to teen mentors. This is something we always need volunteers for, just my little volunteer plug. Teen mentors come alongside kids for up to 9 months of the year, so it is a time commitment. But we feel like that's really important because kids who are refugees have gone through a lot of instability in their lives, and so we want to connect them with someone who's going to be a really stable presence in their life. Youth mentors just help kids with a variety of things, and it's going to be dependent on the child and what they need. So they're usually working with teenagers through youth in their early 20s at that point. So they may be wanting to get a summer job, or learning about applying to college, or maybe they're struggling with their math homework and they need some help. And youth mentors can help them with whatever those goals are. But they also do fun group activities together. So this is a group of some of our kids, and not too many of the mentors wanted to be in the picture because it's hard to wrangle volunteers in a picture sometimes, guys. But they went to the zoo together when the holiday lights were out. So they also get to do fun excursions like that, which are really helpful for our kids because they get to see parts of American culture that they might not have experienced before. So in the last year, 229 school enrollments were completed. So that was really exciting for our kids. 121 students also received school liaison support. So school liaison support is when you may have a trouble with communication between maybe parents and the school. Maybe they have questions or something they don't understand. And so our youth program can come alongside the parents and say, great, let's reach out to the school and find out how we can get you more information in a more accessible way, what we can do to make sure that there's interpreters available for you when you have questions about what's going on with your kids at school. Things like that. We also had 341 students receive backpacks and school supplies. This includes the 229 new arrivals and then additional students who came back after their first year of school and being enrolled who needed some additional school supplies. I will also say, we receive a lot of children who are not school aged yet. So there are many of these children who will be getting a backpack in the future, but they're currently too young to be attending school, which is why they're not in our school numbers. This year we also started a new tutoring program. We've rebranded it as homework helpers because we found out tutoring was a little intimidating for people. But sometimes refugee kids just need a little extra help as this program now jumps in with kids as early as 2nd grade to help them if they're maybe struggling with reading or just needing a little extra help to get over those hurdles that they may encounter in their early years. So this is another opportunity where we're connecting vulnerable kids with community volunteers who are willing to come and just literally help them do their homework. You don't have to be a subject matter expert to help an elementary school kid out with practicing reading or maybe practicing their history or some of those other things. But maybe their parents are working and aren't available to help answer some questions, or maybe they're learning things in school that their parents didn't have the opportunity to learn, like that young Sudanese couple I mentioned. They had a really basic access to education in the refugee camp they were in. So their kids are too young for this program right now, but that's not an uncommon thing to see young parents who didn't have access to a lot of education. And so volunteers can come in and really just help support families and kids as they're kind of learning those fundamental key things as children. And then these are just some of the fun pictures from our youth program because who doesn't love a fun picture? So when the youth program does group activities, in our first picture here, they got to go to an urban farm. So they got to pet chickens and goats and learn a little bit about agriculture. They went kayaking, so they got to go to the Eagle Creek Park and experience that our city has parks and nature and green space. Learned a little bit about nature and plants and things like that, and then got to take kayaks out, which they were all very excited about, and we were all very nervous about, but it went great. They did wonderfully. We taught them about pumpkin carving at Halloween, and taught them about what Halloween is and what they might be seeing and experiencing. Halloween's a holiday we talk about every year at Exodus for new arrivals because it can be kind of startling if you don't know what it is, and suddenly people are knocking on your door and asking for candy if you weren't prepared for what that is, and that's not a cultural tradition in your community. So we work with that for adults, but also we had a program to let some kids participate in some of that. This is one of our excellent teen mentors with her mentee. She said, I became a mentor because I thought it would be so great to get to know and spend time with someone new to our community. With our current political environment, it's really important to me that I show support for refugees coming to our country, and I was happy and eager to help someone feel welcomed and most comfortable here. Mentors don't have to be experts. Something I always tell community members is you know so much about life in the United States that we all take for granted. That refugee kids just don't know, everything from how do you buy bananas at the grocery store? Because some grocery stores do it by weight and some do it by number of bananas, and that's confusing. Not just bananas, that's just an example I like. How do you send mail at your house, and what does it look like if you live in an apartment and you have to drop the mail off somewhere different versus if you have a house and you can just put it in your mailbox. What are school customs? Like, what does it mean when like your school's like, we're having homecoming dance or a prom or here's a pep rally? Like, what do those things mean? These are all things that mentors can talk to teens about and just give them some more exposure to American customs and traditions. And they get to have really cool relationships. I've talked to people who were mentors 10 years ago who, you know, now they've seen the kids grow up and they saw them go to college and get educations, and now they're starting their lives and they're getting to see like, just like this tremendous growth that they got to be a small part of many years ago. Okay, then as I said, keeping an eye on time, run a little over, I apologize. But World Refugee Day is this month on June 20th. World Refugee Day is a holiday celebrated by the United Nations. It is really just an opportunity to honor refugees all around the world because there are so many refugees all around the world right now. It's of course a day to recognize their strength and resilience. Something we say at Exodus is, I have never met anyone more resilient than a refugee, because they have gotten themselves out of a dangerous situation, crossed international borders, got through so much bureaucracy, and like made the decision to come to the United States. And then they work so hard to get their education and to support their families, and they are incredible people. And so World Refugee Day, we recognize the struggles that people have been through as they're escaping conflict and persecution, but we also celebrate that people have brought incredible things to our community. Global Village deserves a shout out. The restaurants on your side of town are incredible. Indianapolis has a really thriving and vibrant international community, and they bring excellent food, amazing cultural traditions, and so much beautiful talent to our community, and so we get to celebrate that on World Refugee Day. Exodus is having an event at our office on June 17th because the 20th is a Tuesday, and we wanted more people to be able to join us. We're having an open house at our office that day from 1 to 4. We're just down on Washington Street. It'll just be a chance for people to come in the community to come in, to tour our office. You can see our warehouse, which is the coolest part of the office. Speak to a former refugee, and we're also going to have refugee artisans there who are selling some of the things that they've made just to help support themselves. We have a lot of really talented artists who have come into our community as well, who used to be refugees who have brought really wonderful work. We'll also have our board and staff and several of our volunteers there who do participate in volunteer activities to talk about ways to get engaged with Exodus. And there's a link on our Facebook page to all of this information. So if you have Facebook, very easy to search Exodus Refugee and find us. And if you don't, I've got a stack of cards here in my pocket. You can definitely email me. I'd love to give you more information. A few more wonderful pictures of our clients with community members. And that's all I have for you today.
Questions?
What area do you work in? Is it Indiana? Indianapolis?
Yeah, great question. So we are primarily placing people in Indianapolis and the donut counties. We are technically allowed to work within a 100-mile radius, but Indianapolis has the best access to public transportation, which is really key for refugees because you don't have a lot of financial resources when you start off. So access to the bus system is really key. But we did also just plant a Bloomington office in 2021. So now we're also resettling in Bloomington.
Is your funding federal also? I mean, you get funding from federal and state governments?
We do get some federal funding. So some of our work, like that initial 90 days after someone is resettled in the United States, that portion of our work is federally funded. But we have an extended array of services like our youth program, we have a women's program, legal services, mental wellness services, a health program, what else? Mental wellness, those are all privately funded additional services that we...
For various institutions like ourselves?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you give us a quick example of what our money was used for?
Yeah, absolutely. So you supported the youth program. So let me go back a few slides here. So some of your money was used for things like, for example, the staff time that went into completing school enrollments and doing this school liaison work to make sure parents are understanding everything that's going on. And some of your money also funded the staff member who was doing all of the backpack and school supplies organizing, as well as some of those school supplies. So he ended up having to, we usually use donated school supplies, but we didn't get quite enough donations. So he ended up having to supplement that with purchasing, so we were able to get a lot of school supplies for kiddos with your money. Great question, yeah.
We met a young Ukrainian refugee who's now 16, and he mentioned something, his parents got a ministry visa because they were both pastors. Does that exist? What is that? Never heard of that before.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that in particular, but there are a lot of ins and outs of the U.S. immigration system, and there are many, many ways that people can find legal routes to the United States. So I'm not familiar with that one in particular. I can look into it, and I'll give you my card actually, because now I'm curious. But I wouldn't be surprised if it did. There are several legal routes into the United States that do exist. And the government was also going out of their way to find ways to welcome Ukrainians in the last way, in whatever way was possible.
How do you take care of housing? I mean, do people donate houses, or do you pay leases for a certain number of months, and do refugees have to take over at some point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Exodus pays rent right now for up to 4 months after someone arrives. The United States government has an expectation that you will be self-sufficient within 90 days of arriving in the United States, which is somewhat unrealistic. So basically what they're looking for is that you are employed and employed in a job that allows you to support your family. So Exodus doesn't have an employment team, so we're helping people find jobs, but we do pay for up to 4 months of rent while you're looking for jobs. And in some cases longer. I don't know if you know, Indianapolis had the largest rental increases in the nation last year. So our rents went up over 30%, which was higher than anywhere else in the country, which is not a good thing to be number one at. So in some cases we've been paying extended amounts of rent. We also have an emergency fund at Exodus that's supported by private donations completely. And we did see that usage go up dramatically because a lot of people saw their rents go up 30% and not their salaries. So we had a lot of families that had been working really hard and had been self-sufficient, needing a little extra help so as to not lose their housing.
Does the risk of housing instability or employment instability affect the refugee status? Like, does that become a risk?
Yeah, good question. It does not. So you are able to remain in the United States under refugee status. You are supposed to get your green card after a year, so we do assist people in applying for their green cards. And then you can continue to live as a lawful permanent resident with a green card. And you're not at risk if your employment goes away or your housing goes away. But it is our goal that people do continue to work, or in some cases of the 80-year-old refugee, maybe she's finding family or other community members to live with and finding other options. So housing is hard though. Affordable housing is a real challenge in Indiana right now, which is not a position that Exodus has been in the past. Indiana's traditionally had a lot of affordable housing, so it's, if anyone is a landlord or knows a landlord who's willing to rent houses to refugees, there's my plug. You can always let us know. We're always looking for housing options.
Any last question? Okay.
Thank you so much. Hang out up there for just a second if you want.
Yes.
I cannot thank you enough for doing this. And I'm gonna steal my notes. I'm gonna trip over this. But in honor of your visit today, we're making a donation in your name to New Shoe Day. They're on a mission to uplift the world's well-being. This year they plan to provide 2,500 new shoe days, new pairs of shoes, to Central Indiana youth in under-resourced communities to empower them to move, play, and make friends like kids should.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Here's a certificate. We want to grab a picture with you afterward.
Yeah,
We also have a certificate for you, so stick around. With that, we are adjourned. We'll be on Zoom next week, learning about things happening at the State Fair, and then back here at the end of the month. Thank you all.